Well, I want to welcome you all to our main meeting. It's so nice to see you all. A presentation on the forts of Florida, the present and from the past, all the way back to, I believe it's the 1600s. And our gentleman tonight, I know you have heard him give a couple of other presentations here on Florida roadside attractions and on Fort DeSoto. And Phillip, who is our historian here and one of our volunteers in the museum. And so he has been here, as I said, since 2004. And he is a volunteer historian and has been for 16 years with Fort DeSoto Park. And so would you please welcome Phillip Schiro.
How are y'all doing tonight?
Fine.
That's a little much. The presentation tonight is going to be on the forts of Florida. Now, I want to put this out before I get going on it. It's a very important thing I'm going to do right now. How many people have been in Florida most of their lives or a good many years? Oh, good. So it's going to be real easy. So y'all recognize all three of these, right?
No. One.
Which one?
Center.
Okay, which one is that?
Isn't it, Jamaica? Well, it's in Ferdinand Beach.
Ferdinand Beach is Fort Clinch.
Fort
Clinch.
Yeah.
So I see we're doing better already. But nobody recognizes the second, the one on the left. Well, this is going to be a nice discussion point because it's a national park here in Florida, and they've recreated it there. But when I'm done with it, I'm going to explain to you that it wasn't there. And we're just finding that out. Anyway, we're going to go back and look at forts. Some of these are going to be very minimal because they don't exist anymore, so it's going to be a little bit of background on them. But we're going to start with the forts of the early 1600s. So all I have is a drawing of this, and this is Fort George. And you also have the Queen's Redoubt and Prince of Wales Redoubt. This is in Pensacola near US 90 and I-110. You've been there. Now, as far as the fort goes, there's not much there. It's just a little piece of a wall, and a monument, and a cannon. But it's important. It's 1778. We've got things going on in Florida into the 1500s. But this is a British fort. You figured that out, I hope it's Fort George, right? Okay, but anyway, that is all there is as far as what they're showing. All right, but now it was the largest of a trio of fortification on the hill in Pensacola area, and Fort George is a quad angle, measuring about 80 yards square. It is a wooden stockade. Yes.
What is a redoubt
When I say
versus a fort? I mean, what's the...
it's normally what they would do once it's been built for a while. They're normally considered temporary initially, and they'll be called that initially, and then they'll move forward. And now a good example of that is Fort Brooke in Tampa. It doesn't start out as a fort; it's containment. And then once it's been over a year to 2 years, they consider it's going to be permanent, and they'll rechange it. So that's one of the reasons they do that.
From a redoubt.
The redoubts are not, they're minor forts, and they are not going to be permanently manned. But they are built in case they need it. And they'll probably won't be manned continuously, and they'll surge to it as needed, but they're available. But anyway, these three forts, though, were garrisoned by almost 1,100 men. So it's actually a pretty good complex. The next one I'll talk about is another English fort, but there's also a United States fort was built there, Fort Gadsden, and that is now at the Yellow Bluff area, up there on the river, right above, halfway to Georgia. This is the Fort Gadsden that was built by the United States, and the one that was built by the British was pretty good size. It was somewhere in the area of this, around it. And it was about 12 acres inside this wooden stockade. Now, it wasn't built for long. The British turned it back over or abandoned it for a better term. And when they did that, it's taken over by the Indians of the area and also the escaped slaves that were in the area. But it was a pretty good sized fort, and that was 450 feet by 700 feet. and it was, had a stone magazine in the center, and I'm doing this because it's very interesting in the next talk about here. Fort Gadsden is one of the biggest loss of lives in the Florida territory. This is before we buy it from Britain. This is a reconstruction of what it might have looked like. That's Gadsden inside it. You see the outside aspect of it. This is a prospect rough in 1816. Notice 1816. You also know this is a very important date because it's still not ours. We don't get it until 1821. This is 1816. But what happens is there's going to be a battle here in 1816, 1818 time frame. And when that happens, there's going to be it's a small battle time-wise, but one shot out of 5 will hit that structure all the way up there, and it's a hot shot. When I say hot shot, you know what I'm referring to. It's where they heat the cannonball till it's red hot and they fire it. It's the size of a baseball, softball. It's a 6-pound cannonball. Well, that cannonball inadvertently hits that magazine, and one shot kills 370 people instantly.
Wow.
Because it levels that 470 feet round wooden stockade.
Who was firing the cannon?
We were, the United States. Here's the story. How many people remember the name Andrew Jackson? Okay. He did something that today, well, even then, we don't think about us doing. He invaded Spain. Spain still owned the Florida territory. And he came down into Florida and attacked this fort. And I'll get into it a little more in a little bit. But it's a big thing because we haven't bought it yet. We're in negotiations to buy this territory. And because of what he did, it delays the negotiations for about 1.5 years. Next fort I'm going to talk about, though, the French fort, Fort Caroline. Now, this is the National Memorial in Jacksonville. It's located on the St. Johns River. Notice I got those nice, lovely question marks there. 7 miles from the Atlantic, past Mayport, across from Blunt Island, on the St. Johns. Established supposedly in 22 June 1564 with about 200 settlers. And 300 more will arrive in August 56. And this is before St. Augustine, the fort we know today, was built. But the discussion is it may have been located in Darien, Georgia. That's that satellite view of the recreationist there. Forgot to say that to y'all. Artist the conception of it there, of what it may have looked like. Here's the French description, though. And this is where you start hearing why they say it might not be in Jacksonville. Located on the River of May, this is the French description, with the river coming down from the mountains. We are in Florida, right? Okay. With evidence of gold, silver, and even copper in the river water. And there's also a reference by William Bartram, who is a British naturalist. He's all in the southeast. In 1760, he said to a possible site on the Altamaha River. And there's a couple things behind that. Here's one of the things I want to point out on it. This is a piece of 1591 French map. And it's showing the interesting things, 3 villages, native Indians of the time, okay, on the map. And it's named. And what you can't see very easily, what does that say? Anybody read it? Caroline. Okay, there's the first evidence. This is the 1721 map. Oh. Old French fort. There was only one French fort, Fort Caroline. But again, you kind of see some references that make you wonder, and it's showing the river going north. St. John's goes south. Now the dimensions of this fort, pretty impressive. There's 3 walls, it's a triangle. 1,800 feet, 2 legs, and the base of it is 1,400 feet. With the large bastions on the corner, at the points, and it's large enough for about 1,000 colonists. Pretty good size. Again, just some perception of what it may have looked like. All right. So here's showing where we believe it could be today. This is a description from Bartram. It's about 65 miles north of where the Fort Caroline site is today in Jacksonville. All right? As you can see, it's directly across from Darien, Georgia, 3.5 miles south on the west bank, roughly 5 miles from the mouth of the river, which is how Bartram described it. So there's Fort Caroline. There's another little fort there on misspelled. It's Mateo. It's a Spanish fort. That was only there for a few years. And I'll bring that up in a second. This is a LiDAR view looking at those same two sites. Fort Caroline, Fort Mateo. The one's just to the east of 95, one's to the west. But you can kind of make out the shape without it being outlined. There's the two obvious shapes there to it. And like I say, they match up to the dimensions. So we've got, I say the evidence is adding up. Now I did this so y'all can know what 1,800 foot is. This is the Largo Mall. So I've outlined a triangle that's 1,800 feet by 1,400 feet. You see it takes up most of that parking lot. That's the target of it. No pun intended, but that's the target of it. But anyway, so it gives you, it's a pretty good sized fort. It's not, you know, it's like I can tell anybody it's 1,000 feet, it's 500 feet. But until I can give you a reference, it's hard to get into. The descriptions of it by the French have it, their ships can come up to that point and bring their supplies in and everything else. What most people don't realize until we start dredging the St. Johns River at Jacksonville, according to descriptions in the 1840s and 50s, you would be doing good to get across the bars to get up the river more than about 1 mile to 1.5 miles. If you were drafting needing more than about 3 feet to 4 feet, you weren't going to go up or down the river because it's going south. It's very, very shallow. There's no way ships of the time could have got into St. Johns River more than about 1 mile to 1.5 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. So there's no way it could be built where it was at because of not accessible by ships of the time. That's the day. This is before the United States, the Spanish forts. We're going to cover all of them just a little bit. Fort St. Marcos de Apalache was in St. Mark's on the St. Mark's River. Castelo de San Marcos, which is St. Augustine itself. There's the dates they were built. Fort Mose, how many people have been there or heard of it? Okay. Fort Mose is interesting because it's the Black Fort, just north of St. Augustine, and I'll talk about that and show it to you in a minute. Fort Matanzas, which is a secondary fort for St. Augustine. It was built in 1740. Mission San Luis de Apalache in Tallahassee. So how many people have been there? Okay. Very embarrassing thing I want to admit right now. I only found out about this fort location last fall. It is not a state park. It is run by the Florida Department of State. It is a living history museum. You can go there and see it and touch it and have people tell you all about it. You got Fort San Carlos de Barracas. You have Fort San Carlos and Fernandina. And then you got Fort San Antonio de Carlos, which is Mound Key. But again, notice the dates, but notice the very important date at the bottom. Fort San Antonio de Carlos, Mound Key. Mound Key is down in Fort Myers. That's in the, off the mainland there, Fort Myers area. That was the Calaboosie Indians. But it's only operated 2 or 3 years. Because of that, we have a lot of information on the Indians, journals and stuff. Here's San Marcos de Apalache, which is the St. Mark's River. Just looking at it from satellite, look at it, this is where it's at. St. Mark's coming down. Drawing of it, 1700s. It is a national park. You can go there and visit it. See, it's just the ruins of it. And again, you've got a little model inside. You can see what it looks like. There's what's there today, the outline of the structure. It was never fully completed. They were still building the stone fort when they turned it over to the British. St. Augustine. Nice shot of it. Everybody probably can recognize it, even though they don't look at it from this angle normally. It's a huge structure. What most people don't know, you can't see what was there. This went out, way out and about it. So it was a very large structure, the size of the physical fort itself. There's a drawing of it. Took 23 years to complete this fort. It is not the first fort in St. Augustine. There will be 9 others prior to this when they were all wooden stockade style forts. And they're never in the same exact spot. But this one here is constructed with about 400,000 stones. When I say stones, it's the carved shell out of the ground that's Anastasia State Park on the beach. And they're all set by hand. Most of them weighing about 300 to 400 pounds. A couple shots looking inside. How many people have been there? I hope everybody has been. With a few exceptions. It's a lovely fort. I mean, when you think about the time frame it's from, it's really nice that we have it. I mean, there's other forts of this style down in Puerto Rico, down in Cuba. Most of us probably haven't been to Cuba. But I'm saying there's some nice locations historical-wise. Fort Mose, 1738, 1763. Artist's conception of what it was. It's about 2 miles north of Fort St. Augustine, right on the intercoastal. This is the state park that's located out here. The actual fort was located out here on what is now an island. It's about 2 to 2.5 acres of land out there. They're actually in the process right now of constructing a building to represent what it was. This is showing where it was at to the north of where the fort is at in St. Augustine. Get an idea of the waterway and a lot of that area we know today. This is the conception of what they're building right now for it. They started construction, I think, in January, February, so it's supposed to be available in summer to have a reference to what was there.
Yeah, question.
Sure, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was the first black fort.
Yes, and that what happened was,
Free men escaping from the south,
right.
going and enlisting in the Spanish.
Well, they were not necessarily enlisting, but they were used. Yeah,
They were used, and some of them were given commissions.
Yes, they were.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the head officer there was a Spaniard, but pretty much everybody else was black.
No, he was a black man
Oh,
who
was?
had a Spanish name.
Oh, okay, okay. 'Cause I looked at the name, I know it was Spanish.
Right, yeah.
This is Fort Matanzas, the tower. This is 13 miles south of the Castillo de Marcos, and it's about 25 miles from the inlet when it was built. Again, looking at it there, looking at it from the straight above it, satellite view of it. The reason I got the 2 lines, the yellow line, that would be the line of sight to the inlet, Matanzas Inlet today. That would have been a line of sight when it was built. The inlet's moved. This is the way Mother Nature is. It's always moving. It was a very small fort to guard that inlet. It's the back door into St. Augustine. It was only being manned with 6 to 10 men. Had about 5 cannons, 4 or 6 pounders, and 1 large 18-pounder. And that's, like I said, the aerial view of it. A couple shots from inside. Again, this is for the enlisted men here. Then up there would be the single officer's quarters and a model of it showing what it looked like at that time. And again, showing that angle, Matanzas right up here at the top. When it was built, that would have been where the inlet was at. About roughly 1/2 mile, 3/4 mile max up at the opening. Today, the opening's all the way down here. Just to give them a reference to how Mother Nature's changed the coastline there. And this is just to show you where everything's at. Fort Mose, St. Augustine, Castillo de Marcos, Fort Matanzas. And there's the Matanzas River, it's like all the way up. It's like it's the back door in. Mission San Luis de Apalache. Now this is the mission. The Castillo is the fort. Fort's up here at the top of it. The mission is this whole section here. Located in Tallahassee, right on State Road 90. This is the artist's conception of what it looked like then, before the town at the north side. This is the Mission Council House for the Indians. That was built before the Spanish got there, so this already existed. The church. That's a picture of the council house. The council house is 120 feet in diameter. It's 40 to 50 foot tall. And they, according to the Spanish, about 1,500 to 2,000 people to stand under its roof. And it is a living history museum, open Tuesdays through Sundays. Right there it is, it is. I spent all day long there that day. This is actually the last state park. Looking inside that council house, looking up the ocula for the smoke to go out, again, you can see a little bit of the actual way the structure is built. And we've been all thatched with palm fronds. Stockade is the four-sided stockade, 130 by 230. Got a blockhouse of 40 by 70 in the center. Actually, this is what it looks like today. This is inside the church. It's 50 by 110 feet. It has been completely rebuilt as it should have been at the time. It is not on the physical site it was on, and that is because they had detected in excess of 800 graves under the original site of the church. So it looks like they buried the Indians inside the floor of the church as they passed. So that's why it's not on the original site. This is Fort San Carlos de Astria. Again, all we have is one little corner of it. This is in Pensacola also on the naval base. It was garrisoned by 100 to 400 men. As you can see, it was pretty good sized. Okay, I want to say it's roughly 300 feet from the bay there in Pensacola. And this is its inception at the same place. So you get an idea of what it was like. It's small at that town of Pensacola, right there on the bay. This is the other Fort St. Carlos. How many people have been to Fort Clinch? So you've been to Fort, well, there's no fort there now. This is St. Carlos. This is Old Town Fernandina. Notice the drawing from the 1560s or 1800s. Notice the roads today. Same roads, well, paved. This is the fort the physical location of the fort, which would have been on the intercoastal. It's roughly 200 by 200 feet, armed with about 8 or 10 guns at battery.
If I can make a brief comment on that.
Sure.
That is the last town that was ever platted in the New World by the Spanish.
Yes, it was, yeah.
Very last one before they sold.
Now, since y'all been to Fort Clinch, here's the reference. There's Old Town, where Fort San Carlos is at. There's Fort Clinch on the St. Mary's River, Florida-Georgia line. I know this very well. That's where my submarines went in and out when I went to sea. But it's literally only 1 mile from the two locations, just a few centuries apart. I'm going to show it to you again, but anyway, notice the streets here. Like I say, as you can tell pretty well, they still match up. Like I say, it's just rotated 90 degrees. The fort was down here, so it's here on the side here, this one. But again, this is from the original rep map from the 1880 time frame, 1820 time frame. Here's at Santon de Carlos, which is Mound Key. I want to go into this a little bit because I like to talk about the Indians just a little bit. Mound Key was a village for the Caloosa Indians. Here's a model of what the mountain would look like. There was for a better term, a canal into the middle of it. You had the 2 and 3rd mounds. All right, it was only an operational Spanish fort about 2.5 years. They did say that there was about 1,000 Indians that lived on Mount Key, roughly. But we know something about this because it's Spanish. So it's kind of hard to see here, but I'm going to show it to you. These 2 lovely little lagoons, for a better term, are fish pens, or fish corrals. And they're pretty good size, but we would not know what they were if it wasn't for the Spanish description. And again, you can kind of see it here, there's that west court, east court of it. This here was the structure, would have been on Mound 1. Again, a council type house. This drawing is using the references from the Spanish. Somewhere in the area of 80 to 90 feet in diameter. And according to the Spanish, about 2,000 people could get under its roof. That's kind of crowded. If the chiefs want to talk to you, you're going to get shoved in there. But anyway, what's interesting about these courts, though, the fish courts, the Indians cheated. They're going to use Mother Nature where they can. So they took these little shallow lagoons and they built them up with shell to get a berm. So at high tide, it was enclosed. and they left an opening usually about 30 to 40 yards wide. So at high tide, water came in, and the schools of mullet and redfish came in, and then they put up a nice mesh netting made out of palm fronds, so when the water went out, the fish couldn't get out. So we jokingly say, it's time for dinner, and I'm in my spirit, I'm like, the fish can't get away. Now, they're pretty good size. One was about 36,000 square feet, the other was about 27,000 square feet. So they're 3/4 of an acre each, roughly. So pretty good size, but like I say, we know what they were because the Spanish described what the Indians were doing. Otherwise, we would be like, what was this? Well, we would have thought it might have been natural. We've got a couple of them recreated. Those forts were Fort Brooke, which is downtown Tampa. Fort Christmas, which is over in Christmas, Florida, off State Road 50. Fort Cooper, which is up south of Brooksville, or north of Brooksville. Inverness. You got Fort Dade, which nobody knows about that one. That's just above Dade City. Fort Defiance, which is also Fort Micanopy. There was 2 forts there. One was abandoned, and then they rebuilt it again. You got Fort Drane. Most people don't know about this one. I'll show it to you on the map, though. Fort Foster. Y'all have all been there, right? Nobody's been to Hillsborough River State Park? There's a fort there on the other side of 301, but I'll show you some pictures of it. Yeah, well, right now it's not open at all because of the damage to it. But they were going to try and get it open this season. Then you got Fort King in Ocala. They just rebuilt that in 2017. And then you got the third system seacoast forts. These are the brick forts. Fort Clancy, we've already made a comment in Fernandina Beach. Fort Marion, which is St. Augustine. When we bought Florida, we renamed that fort Fort Marion. You have Fort Zachary Taylor in Key West. How many people have been there by chance? It's a nice little fort. Kind of weird. It's only one side by definition. You got the East Martello Towers, East and West Towers in Key West, which were secondaries to Zachary Taylor. You got Fort Jefferson and the Dry Tortugas, the big fort. And we got Fort Pickens in Pensacola, Fort Barracus in Pensacola also, and then the Advanced Redoubt, which is also in Pensacola, which they're all national parks. I brought this, I almost didn't do it, but I decided to put it in here. This is a working replica of the same gun that was at the Dade Massacre. This is a very standard travel artillery piece for the time frames for so many wars. It is only a 6-pounder. All right, a 6-pound cannon fires a shell that's about 3.5 inches in diameter. So it's roughly the size of a fat baseball. Not a softball, but a large baseball. All right, and it had normally a range of about a mile and a quarter. I just wanted to show that to you. This is the field piece that would be moving with troops at the time, even up to the Civil War. We not really doing much over a 10 or 12 pounder, most of them 6-pounders. Here's Fort Brooke. Established at the mouth of the Hillsborough River. And I said, everybody here, because of my previous presentation, know where Fort Brooke is at. Okay, you can't go see it today, but it's located right where the hockey stadium is at. The Tampa History Museum or the Florida Aquarium, on the very tip of downtown Tampa, which is why that canal is called Garrison Channel. That's where the fort was located at. It's located in the lower 6 blocks of downtown Tampa. But there's a little bit more to it than that. Here's the location of the fort. There's Whiting Street. Okay, so you got a lot of structures. There's no actual fort though. There is a redoubt down here, which is just temporary walls. It's not a fully enclosed. It's to take a place to go and take refuge if you are physically attacked and got some walls already up. But this is down here on Whiting Street. Like I say, the Amelia Arena, the museum, the aquarium are today. But the actual reservation for the fort went out 8 miles from it. So this is the reservation inside the red circle. Alphi River. There's the airport. There's Fletcher. That's Lake Sonota-Sassa. There's MacDill. Basically, everything that's inside the city limits of Tampa today would have been inside the fort reservation, which means you could not settle on it. It's not available for settlers to go and homestead while the fort's operational. So some of them did. But that's the guideline. But that's the Fort Brooke area. Any questions on that? Kind of weird, but that's how they did it.
And what year was that?
Fort Brooke is established in 1824. Is considered a manned and operational fort to about 1878. Only 1 or 2 years it wasn't manned. But it was a physical fort for almost, or solid 50 years. It is the gateway into the Florida territory in the 1830s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and up to Civil War time. This is Fort Christmas. Anybody been there by chance? It's a nice one to go to. It's open 7 days a week. It's on State Road, or it's just off of State Road 50, about 10 miles before you get over to Titusville. So you're about 10 miles from 95. It's on off of State Road 50. It's a wooden stockade fort built to the size of the original fort. It's about a mile from the original location, though. The original location was literally on Fort Christmas Creek. But this is for Bear Sure, our heritage type park. It's a county park. There's the fort there in the middle, but they've got one of the old schoolhouses from the 1900s, and a lunchroom that was from one of the schools, and you've got a couple of the ranch houses and cracker homes from the early 1900s. So it is in the 1890s, the Yates House. So like I say, it's from that time frame of early Florida. But it is open 7 days a week. So if you're over that way or whatever, be aware of it. Fort Christmas. It's a nice, actually a nice setup. Got a nice little museum inside. Fort Cooper. Anybody been up to Inverness for the Fort Cooper location? There's no fort there today. All we have is a one wall showing how it would have been built, what it would look like. This is a fort built for necessity only. After one of the battles in the Withlacoochee Basin area, Fort Cooper was constructed in April 1836. 300 men of the 1st Georgia Battalion of Volunteers built this square fort of about 1.2 acres, including the 2 redoubts, which are the raised corner structures, and a 2-story blockhouse inside. They're building it in an emergency status because the men are going back to Tampa, and they've got about 80 or 100 men that have been injured or badly injured, and he leaves these 300 men behind to get this fort and defend them while he comes all the way back down to Tampa and comes back to bring wagons, etc., to transport all these injured personnel. And they're there 16 days, and the Seminole Indians, they get it built in 3 days. The Seminole Indians are attacking them for about a 16-day period of time. Unfortunately, they made one minor mistake when they built the stockade, for a better term. They're about 150 foot from the spring. So the water's outside. But they did hold. They only had a few people. I think they lost 8 or 10 men total that were killed while the Seminole Indian attack. But that is the story of Fort Cooper. And it ended up being used off and on for about 4 years after that as a supply point on that side of the Withlacoochee Basin area. Here's that Fort Dade one I made a comment about. Most people don't know about this one. It was located on the south bank of the Withlacoochee River, 1 mile east of 301. It's about 7 miles north of Dade City today. Supplies were sent up from Fort Brooke, and the fort began taking shape after only 2 weeks. It included blockhouses, barracks, storerooms, and a hospital. It was an operational fort for about 5 years. It was actually a big supply point. Basically, it was halfway from Tampa, not quite halfway, to Ocala, Fort King. So that's why it was a big deal. And they're still on the south side of the Withlacoochee Basin, so they can go in south of that swamp area instead of go up to Fort King and come back down to it. I just give you an idea of Florida. There's the Withlacoochee River going in. There's the Withlacoochee Basin area. Fort Cooper's right there. General Clinch's battle was up here, which is when they went down to Fort Cooper. Clinch was coming all the way back down to Brooke. Way up here is Micanopy, and Ocala would be over in this area here, Fort King. This is Micanopy area. There were a couple battles up here prior to the Dade Massacre. The Dade Massacre was considered to be the beginning of the Second Seminole Indian War. Okay, so there was actually a couple battles. Mainly the one is the Battle of Black Point, which is December 18th of 35. The Dade Massacre is 7 days later. So there was actually one battle before that. And there's a couple more up in that area of Micanopy, right around Fort Defiance, in that first year of the Second Seminole War. Second Seminole War is important because it's the most men are here. It encompasses the largest area of the war aspect, basically from Lake Thanota-Sassa up to Micanopy. Most of us in the area of the Withlacoochee Basin is where 90% of it happens. So you can kind of think 301 and over towards the coast here. But that's your Second Seminole War. This is Fort Drane and also Fort Micanopy and Defiance. This is a drawing for Fort Defiance, Fort Micanopy. But I just want to give you this to give you an idea. This is Fort King. This is Micanopy. This is Fort Drane on a different trail. But it's a little bit closer to get to the beginning of the Withlacoochee Basin area, Lake Panasoffkee. But this is a kind of a reference. You're looking at the distances here. Micanopy is 25 miles from King, so it's a good distance. But Drane is only about 20 miles from, so you get an idea of what's going on in that area. It's kind of a combat area, kind of like the Civil War. Most of your battles are a really small area, considering how much area it encompasses. But a lot of stuff is going on in that section of Florida for the Second Seminole War. And a 3D look at what Micanopy would have looked like. Now, I'm pointing this out. Notice the fort and the tents are outside, but this wasn't uncommon. It might not be big enough for everybody to be in there, especially when you're surged. But everybody can get in and take defense inside the fort if you're attacked. But there's not enough room to put all the tents. If you had suddenly 1,000 people there, the fort's designed for maybe a couple, 300. But like I say, this is not inaccurate seeing the tents being outside. This is Fort Foster. Now, how many of y'all have not been there? No. Okay. This is what it looks like. It's right there on the east side of 301. It's on the Hillsborough River, or 50 yards from it. So you can kind of see what it looks like here. This is inside, looking toward the Sally Port. The Sally Port is facing south. Looking down at the top, there's the Hillsborough River. There's a bridge going across. And the Sally Port is over here. There is a gun port on the corner of the fort, and they had a 6-pounder there. And when you opened up the port, you're looking right down the bridge. So if the Indians were coming to get it to you, you got them shooting down through. But this is where it is. It's 120 feet by 120 feet size of the fort. It does exist today. They were hoping to get it back open. There was a lot of water damage from the floodings over the last couple of years from the river overflowing. When the Hillsborough overflows, sometimes the fort is standing in water. Fort King. It's located in Ocala. It's about 2.5 miles southwest of Silver Springs itself. This is what they've recreated. Right now, what's inside is not there yet. They just got the outside the fort, roughly 152-foot walls on it. Like I said, built in 2017. It is on the actual site. Unfortunately, since it was done now, they had to pour concrete footer. So all the wooden poles are mounted by metal onto the concrete footer. So it's not like the other forts, Foster or Fort Christmas, that are built like they would have been built back then. So it's, unfortunately, it's a new recreation, which meant it had to meet today's building codes. This is what it looks like. This is a picture of it from the outside. They just finished building a blacksmith building, and they do demonstrations of blacksmithing and making things at that time frame. And this is open, I think, back in October. So they are planning on having all those items inside it over the next 5 years. Now we're into the brick forts. Fort Clinch. A few of y'all been there. This is the entryway to Sally Port going in. St. Mary's River. Kings Bay, Georgia would be up there with the Trident submarines and that. And I was stuck there for 18 years. Made 21 patrols out of Kings Bay. It's a lovely area. But back when I got there, the roads were still made out of cobblestone and a lot of shale. This is looking
So
down on
is the
top of.
submarine,
Huh?
and so is the submarine.
Watch.
Just kidding.
It's a brick fort with both an inner and outer walls. You can move all the way through the walls, and you got the gun slots looking out from it. So I want to say roughly 500 feet, yeah, from here to here. It's right on the St. Mary's River. It's a nice state park. For those of y'all that might do camping, they got 2 campgrounds there. One's on the beach, more or less, within about 50 yards of the beach, and the other's on the intercoastal waterway. So if you don't like the beach, you can go on the freshwater zone. But it is a very nice park. This is inside. So you got the lovely barracks with the 3 high. Anyway, you see the nice stonework, ceilings. So it is a nice one. It was never fully completed. This is one of our CCC parks during the 30s. The Conservation Corps did a lot of work there and got it opened as a state park, or ready for it to be a state park. So it's considered one of the Conservation Corps state parks, and they did a lot of work on it at the time frame. It's Fort Jefferson in the Dry Tortugas. It is a large fort. Best way to put it, 60 miles from Key West. Looking at this fort, y'all know this fort, right? It's he was named Mudd, Dr. Mudd. But anyway, Fort Jefferson, the courtyard inside the walls is 13 acres of land. It was 2/3 complete when the Civil War began. Nearly 5 million bricks were used to build this. It was designed but never been fully completed. In theory, it could have had 400 some odd cannons. Again, looking at that looking into the courtyard from up on the walls. It's a 6-sided fort. 4 of them are 477 feet long, 2 are 325 feet long, and there were 3 large barracks. It was supposed to be manned by about 1,100 men. The outside with the moat around it. And again, you see those lovely brick arches, looking at it from the 1940s time frame. And the gun, this is looking from the inside out where the guns have been. And it's a lovely structure, it really is. Especially when you consider it was built in the 1840s and 50s time frame. Fort Zachary Taylor, Key West, constructed in the 1845-50 time frame. It's only got 2-tier casements and 4 bastions. Now this is what I call the half fort. You've only got the 3 walls, or as they were called, the drapes. When it was built, to get to this fort was a 1,200-foot long causeway back to the main island. I believe the island was built on the Sullivan Island. None of this was here. It was on the water. And barracks, and this was the main barracks here for about 800 men. These are the east and west Martell Towers on Key West. I will gladly go back if y'all have any questions on any one of the forts when I get to the end. I'll backtrack on them. But these are the Martell Towers. These are both of them about 4 or 5 miles, not even at most, from the actual Zachary Taylor. This one's still there. I think that's being used as a garden shop. They're in private hands. This one's pretty much destroyed completely, but this one's still as you see it today. This is Fort Pickens, Pensacola Harbor, completed in 1834. Anybody been to Fort Pickens? Okay. I'm going to point this out. Don't jump on this, because I want to do it. It was completed. This is a boo-boo. They had a fire. And it blew up a main powder room. And bricks landed all the way in Pensacola, a mile and a half away from it. So it was a boo-boo. Anyway, Fort Pickens is built there. Very large star fort. Let's see if I got a little bit on that one here. 21 million bricks were used. 1899, we right at the, oh damn, this is the time frame of the Spanish-American War, right after. Fire broke out in Bastion D. It reached the magazine, which contained 8,000 pounds of gunpowder. The resulting explosion killed only 1 soldier. That's good. The force explosion was so great that bricks from that wall, those walls were landing across the bay at Fort Bragg, over a mile and a half from Fort. Yes.
They imprisoned all the famous Indians you see there.
They say Geronimo.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a Pensacola.
Okay.
But it is a lovely area, to be honest with you. Unfortunately, it's an area that hurricanes seem to like on a more,
Oh, yeah.
much more regular basis than us, which is good.
And Fort McRae is across. the-
Right across, well, the remnants of it, yeah, there's not much there. That's looking inside it. Again, you see the remnants of where the explosion was at. But again, you see the archways and stuff. But this section here, this is the World War II additions that were done. The gun batteries in World War II are installed there. And then we have Fort San Carlos de Caracas. Now this is two different forts by definition. You got the Spaniard fort and then the U.S. fort was built. This was considered a water fort. This is from 1787 time frame originally. This is again 1861 photo. The sergeant strikes over Caracas. And here's the advanced redoubt. This is 1845, 1870. It was built to defend the tip of Pensacola, the peninsula itself, to prevent land attack going towards the Navy Yard. Now, this one here, I brought in a satellite of this one. Here's Fort Pickens on the way in. There's Caracas. There's the redoubt. I think it's about 300 yards, no, about a mile north of it. And yeah, and Fort San Carlos de Austria is only, that's about 300 yards over. So there's a lot of stuff over the different times, the English, the Spanish, they were all in Pensacola because it's been under many flags. Yep. And there's the air station. So you're right on Naval Air Station, Pensacola. Again, this is the advanced redoubt. This is an older photo in the 40-50 time frame, what it looks like more or less today. So it's again, these are all available to go and visit. I don't see, somebody's got a bucket list, okay. And these are the forts you can visit today. You got the wooden stockade forts in Florida. Fort Christmas, Fort Foster, hopefully it'll be open this year. Fort King is new. And Mission San Luis in Tallahassee. That really should be on everybody's bucket list. But in case you don't want to drive to Tallahassee, you can do a virtual tour of Mission San Luis. You can go online and walk through it. There are 7 brick forts from Pensacola, Fernandina to Key West. And let's not forget the dry tortugas. These are all built pre-Civil War, if they were not, then none of them were finished completely. And then you have the 2 original Spanish forts in St. Augustine, original, Matanzas, and the fort itself. And then don't forget, we have them in our backyard. Way after that time frame, 1900 Fort Bay and Fort DeSoto in our backyard. Any questions at all? I'll back up.
Did you talk about the fort that's on the Britain River, the Spanish fort that's there at the National Historic Monument? That's the original Fort DeSoto.
We've never looked for it.
So that is
But there is
the,
a fort built there.
that is
There
the
a-
Hernando de Soto National
That's the
Monument.
National Monument.
DeSoto
And
National Monument, yeah.
the structure that is nearby was the old Braden
That's the
Castle.
Brady Castle.
But that was not a fortification.
The Braden Castle.
The-
Okay,
the-
now,
the
the
spa-
wooden
the-
stockade is the
the-
Braden
the-
Castle.
No, the brick fort is what they call, people call it Fort Brayton Castle. Hernando de Soto was there at that point for 2 days. This is the only time Hernando de Soto was there. He never even offloaded his men. They went there to look for water and find the land route into Florida. They realized they're on an island and on the mainland, and they take their ships and go in and they offload at the Little Manatee River.
Okay, but they built a fort. I would imagine they would instruct, it's a very small fort. It was the Spanish encampment when they were there. And they have reenactments.
Oh, they do the reenactments for the landing, yes. They do the landing, but I'm saying they were only at that location for less than 48 hours. Once they realized they were not on the mainland, they got the few men that they got off, they got back on the ships and went into the Little Manatee River.
So that whole thing is just a farce?
No, no, it's a acknowledging the landing in Florida by DeSoto. That is the first place he touches in Florida.
But that wasn't what was read, and that's not what's in the history in the museum there.
They offloaded the Little Manatee River. Once they get back on the ships, it takes them almost 3 more days to get 5 miles into Tampa Bay. Because they did land there, but the 800 men never got off there. Only a few got off, and they did the initial looking to see to go in, and they realized they're on an island. And the water for the Brady River and stuff were relatively deep, so there was no way to ford it. That's why they had to go on down farther in.
Okay, that was very confusing.
Yeah. Yes.
On the design, if I look at the San Marcos, and you know, so many of the others, you get to the tips, and they have those angles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what was the strategic reason?
The reason for that was that, one, they could shoot down the walls, and they could bring better crossfire at what they call the half-mile distance. That's the reason for having those bastions sticking out like that, and they're not just a triangle going out. It gives them that squared off shape, so you get a nice line of fire along the walls. And most of them did have, for a better term, a moat or an embankment, where they dig out and throw the dirt up and then put the walls built on the dirt so you got a low spot. So that way it makes it that much harder for them to try and take the walls. Most of the times the forts that were made out of wood, especially, were only 12 or 16 foot high walls, but they would dig down 2 and 3 foot, throw the dirt out, compact it. Then that way it's easier to embed the wooden logs to make their stockade walls. Do I need to go back to any of them? Feel free. Anybody was interested in any one in particular? Yes, ma'am. No? I guess that's about it.